Hello and welcome to the Financial Wellness Hour. I am your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I am thrilled to have you here today on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. This show is for those wanting to learn more about creating financial wellness, and we're going to look at different life cycles and explore them both financially and emotionally, because personal finances are more about the emotions associated with your funds than the money itself. And the healthier you are emotionally, the better prepared you are when you have to make financial decisions. Although we might be somewhat general in our discussion, we'd love to hear from you. So please call in, or you can reach me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial, or you can post your questions and comments on YouTube, Facebook, or anywhere else you might be listening to the show. You know, most people feel confused and disorganized when they start their divorce. And without being somewhat deliberate and structured in your approach to your divorce, it often gets worse. Not great news, I guess, right? But I often hear questions like, what do I want at the end of my divorce? How do I focus on all of this? How do I communicate with my divorce team, the professionals I'm working with? And these are just a few of the questions that I hear from clients. The earlier you start to gather your thoughts and your information and know your situation, the better it's going to be. It's going to help you reduce some of your stress. It's going to help improve your ability to create a strategy, and it's going to improve your chances for a better outcome, which is ultimately what we all want. Today, we have Shanahan and Karen Chellew, the founders of My Divorce Solution, to help us understand how to get organized through your divorce and beyond potentially. And we're going to look at the beginning and we're going to build on that. And as we called the show, Ready, Set, File, it's very, very important to be organized as quickly as possible. And if you're the one making the decision, even before you file, is an important time to get ready. So Karen has over 30 years in the legal field, is a certified Quadro administrator, which, by the way, comes up all the time. Quadros are enormously important, and understanding them and having the right decisions or the right discussions is so important. Catherine has more than 30 years in the financial industry, and after experiencing her own divorce, and she decided she's going to become a CDFA, Certified Divorce Financial Analyst, and a trained mediator. And as we were just saying, very, very similar path to my background as well, which is always nice to see how people take their experiences and move forward in life. And I think this is just an incredibly strong combination for the discussion that we're going to have and exploring this topic of getting ready. So, Catherine and Karen, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having us.
No, it's a pleasure. And I think, we were talking, and I think it is so important because often there's a disconnect between the financial group that you work with and the financial group that you work with. And putting legal and financial together becomes so much stronger, and building that team, if you can, ultimately. And you both obviously have a passion and drive in sharing your message and what you've created, which is something we'll get to. I think it's important we share that. It comes from experiences, it comes from your journey. So I'm going to ask you to share a little bit more and elaborate a little bit more on your backgrounds, your story, and kind of where this inspiration came from.
Okay, so I guess I'll start this. So I was married for 23 years to an aggressive personality, and I was a financial planner. I raised a blended family of 5 children. And finally, when my youngest was in high school, I just said, I can't live like this, right, any longer. And so when I went through the divorce process, even though I have an accounting background, I was a financial planner, I was really scared financially. I negotiated our own deal because I became a CDFA, but it was still scary. So I thought, oh my gosh, there's got to be hundreds of women at that time, I thought, that are scared. So I'm going to give up my FINRA licenses and devote myself to helping women through the process. But in starting that, I realized that it was more than that. My final document was not ironclad, which put me back in the courtroom just a few years ago. And I just knew that it wasn't just financial. It was something in the legal process that wasn't right either. And I knew Karen through a colleague of ours, and I approached her and I said, you know what, this is bigger than just the financial side. Your expertise would be phenomenal to be a partner with. And there we have it. That's how we started. And she has a very different background, which of course she could tell herself. So I'll let her take it over from here.
Yeah, so I too went through a divorce, but like Catherine said, from a very different environment. I had 30 years in the legal industry. When I got divorced, I was 10 years in. And my battle, for lack of a better word, was custody. So finances became very secondary. As a mom, you're just hanging on to, your kids. And I had the best attorneys available to me, but I was just focused on custody and parenting plan and how are we going to get this done? And so because of that, I didn't have any financial awareness. So I settled for whatever they told me to settle for. And again, like Catherine, a couple years out of my divorce, I ended up back in court on the financial side because I was wide open to my spouse's bankruptcy and other debts in his name that I had not been protected from. So when Catherine asked me to join in, I could readily see the importance of the integration of finance and legal. And that integration is critical when anyone is getting ready for divorce, thinking through both sides and balancing all that out. We know now is essential.
Yeah, it is so important because you need the right combination. I'm a financial expert. I don't want to give you the legal side of it. The legal people are experts in the legal side. They shouldn't be giving you the financial side of it, I guess. But the combination of them working together becomes so much more powerful. And I think one of the other things that, I'm always fascinated about is that I'm always interested in hearing my guests' backgrounds. And it's nice to have two today where you see such a different background, but yet coming together, and seeing it inevitably. I think everyone has a unique approach, how they got to where they are and why they're doing what they're doing. But with that said, everyone's divorce is different, and, I think preparing for your divorce, though, has some very important common themes that you do need to follow or you need to go through. So we're going to run through a few of them in getting ready for your divorce. I think let's maybe start by focusing on the components of the marital estate, because so many people really do not understand fully how a marital estate is made up. Just to throw out, we are not giving legal advice. We are highlighting topics that you should be aware of, I guess is a better way to put that. But also, state by state, it can be different even. So let's talk a little bit, share, if you would, and elaborate a little bit more on kind of what is the marital estate and what do people need to know about the components of it?
It's fun to have the two of us. Sometimes we don't know which one wants to jump in because we're going to give you a couple of different perspectives. So, Karen, you want to take this one?
Sure. So a lot of people, when they start the divorce process or even halfway in, have no idea about the wholeness of the marital estate and how transactional it is. They're still very much in the space of his pension, her credit card, right, his job, my stock units, whatever it may be. And they really don't have a good understanding of what comprises the marital estate, whether or not it's in one person or joint names, the date of acquisition. All of these variable and factorizations do come into it, and they don't understand. And not having that knowledge really skews their ability to negotiate and make really good decisions for themselves, because then by default, they're coming at it from an emotional space. Well, I don't want to take that, or is that mine? And then it becomes a very emotional conversation when it really should just be, this is it. And it's, Catherine can talk more about this. It's not always what's on that net worth statement that one spouse or the other may have.
So it's all of your assets all of your debts, all of your income, and all of your expenses. So anything that is in your name or not in your name needs to be considered. You need to think about that, whether it's separate property or marital property, it needs to be disclosed so that you have transparency. There's a symmetry of information that you can make a smart decision. And, Hirsch, I want to bring back to your intro here, and it really ties into what Karen's even saying as well. And it's something I probably say every day. What I love about our process and what I love about your intro is that you mentioned the emotional value to every asset, debt, income, and expense. And when you just go through the divorce process the old school way, which is you each go hire an attorney, you don't get the emotional value there that you're seeking. The emotional value needs to be heard. Our platform is set up that one or both parties will be heard emotionally. And that emotional that emotional space that you're allowed to unravel allows you to then look at this asset or this debt as it relates to the data of the information. And it's the data that you need to make a smart decision. But you can't do that if you're just walking around in a cloud of emotions and you're listening to everybody else talk for you. And that's really, I was happy to hear that in your intro. And that's really one of the biggest spaces that we have that I'm really proud of. It's the ability for somebody to reconnect with all of the components of their estate to make really smart decisions that are based on data.
It's important to also, understand, as you said, I call it the fog of emotion that people are going through. They can't see clearly. And, I'll speak to people and they'll say, oh, that's his pension because he's been putting money away all these years. And then I'll say, okay, well, where did it come from? They'll say, oh, from his earnings. And then I'll say, okay, and where's your maintenance coming from? Or your alimony, as it used to be called. Oh, it's coming from his income. Okay, so let's break that down, right? It's coming from the same source. Why is one part of the marriage, so to speak, and one not part of the marriage? So
yeah. And do you often get, with that explanation, we often hear, well, let me explain to you why, because I stayed home and took care of the kids, and they have to justify, the non-earning spouse feels like they have to justify why that pension is in their spouse's name. And I always say, stop, it's part of the marital estate. You have just to write, yes, your role was to stay home and take care of the kids, and that is a tough role. But you always get that they feel guilty that they didn't contribute to a pension or a retirement plan. And that's the emotional part. That's the unraveling that has to be heard.
There will be that there is it's maybe not a tangible dollar figure, but if you had to pay somebody to take care of your kids or send them to daycare, or, how many thousands upon thousands of dollars have you contributed that didn't necessarily look like a transaction, but saved you from having to go through one? So very, very important to understand these components and understand that it is equal, that it's a partnership. And sometimes in a partnership, from a business perspective, somebody brings in $100,000, somebody else brings in an expertise. You still might be 50-50.
And to underscore that, Hirsch, when you're identifying what your marital estate is, I always ask people to just put the emotional piece of decision on the shelf, because later you get to decide based on a variety of factors, whether you feel you deserve it or not, or you want it or you don't want it. Just focus on what the it is to start out with. And giving people that space is really empowering.
I agree 100%. So as a divorce professional, it's easy for me to say, client, you need, and then list out a bunch of things, right? Bank statements, retirement account, pension statements, whatever it might be. What happens if somebody has limited access to the marital data and the documents?
Well, so with all the information, people have more information than they actually realize, and we help them access what they can. But just knowing someone's history, it's amazing to me always, and I'm really always proud. And I hate to still say this, but it's mostly a majority of women. But tides are changing, and there's a shift there. We do have a lot of male clients who come in, and their wives are the wage earners. But it always amazes me at the information that they know. Just by knowing stories about your past, bring out accounts, which is amazing to me. So, and it makes them feel so much better. So we take down as much as we can. We help them access what we can access excuse me. And then we provide a list in recommendations and considerations of what still is outstanding and what could be outstanding. So it gets us to a certain point in our process. We have the space, because we're not attorneys, we don't file anything. We can invite the spouse to be a participant. They either come in as joint clients or they come in as participants. And it's really, we have about over 90% rate of spouses participating, which is amazing, because the amount of information that we get from them is valuable in many ways, emotionally and financially, and just for the sake of moving forward in a better direction. So if there is not a way to get all of the information, there's a way to outline it so that you are not forced into a mediation to make decisions based on not having information.
All right, so we've got the documents. We understanding our components of the marital estate. We seem like we are making progress and the momentum's moving forward. And then we hit another stumbling block, right? So the problem here could be, I've now gathered 3 years worth of information, but I have absolutely no idea how to interpret this. What have I collected? I don't know. How does one learn more or kind of get to understand and interpret this data and the documents as it relates to the division of assets?
So our process does have a negotiation tool, and it's the interpretation of all assets and all debts and all the considerations that you have to make. Now, remember, we're not attorneys and we're not investing your money for you. But what we are doing is your team, you have a team member, 4 team members on your team. And so your team is doing a review with you to go over all of those assets and all of those debts and what should be considered. So with that consideration comes understanding, because now you're understanding why you need to consider something. So it could be, the example could be, okay, this is a Roth IRA and this is a traditional IRA. You have to consider that this Roth IRA has a different tax implication. There are no taxes paid on that one. And your traditional IRA, you need to consider that there are tax ramifications from that. So by providing somebody that information, imagine the light on the lightness in their face, because they think, oh, okay, now all I have to understand is that there's a tax implication with these two. They don't have to understand where the IRAs are invested at that moment. They don't have to understand everything at that moment, but they have to understand that don't just agree to take the Roth or not take the Roth, because there's a different tax implication. So we do that with every asset and every debt, which is the best starting point for them to understand the components of their estate.
That's great. No, and I think, I'm a huge champion of being educated. I do want to talk a little bit more about that when we come back, but right now we have to go to a break. Before we do, what is a good way for people listening to be able to reach out to you or to learn more about My Divorce Solution?
So the best way to find us or reach us is at our website, mydivorcesolution.com. There's a ton of information there, and there is access to taking an online assessment very quick, just an overview, and scheduling a call with a professional here at My Divorce Solution to just review. It's free to review, what your questions are, where you are in the process, and how our services can best support you. We're also on all those social media platforms, and we do have a podcast, We Chat Divorce.
So I encourage everyone to go to mydivorcesolution.com, and we will be right back in 2 minutes.
Hi, I'm John Thomas. I want to share with you a professional products and services directory we call Going Solo Directory. And you need to check this out. If you want exposure to your business or are seeking professional product or services, this directory has it all. And that membership, for the many special features, you get the benefit of a worldwide exposure with a 40-minute video interview on an international business show showcase. All this for just one low annual fee. For more information, contact GoingSoloDirectory.com.
Hello and welcome back to the Financial Wellness Hour. I'm your host, Hirsch Sermon, and I'm thrilled to have you here today with me on WGSN-DB, the Going Solo Network. Our topic for today is Ready, Set, File. We are looking at getting ready for divorce, and our guests today are Karen Chellew and Shanahan, the founders of My Divorce Solution. And one of the things that I've been loving about this is, in my own practice, how often I find that there is a disconnect from the legal side to the financial side. And this platform helps to bridge that gap so much. Quick recap of some of the things that we have covered, just a little bit about their backgrounds, and that everybody's background is different, which means everyone's divorce is going to be a little bit different. We prepare for divorce in different ways, but there are some common themes or components that we really need to master, and that helps reduce our stress and helps us in so many ways. We spoke about the components of a marital estate. We did understand about understanding our own situation, covering not just marital estates, but collecting the data, interpreting the data. What does all of that mean? A little bit on helping you reduce stress, communicating with your legal team, or actually your whole divorce team, the professionals that you work with. Getting educated is kind of where we left off a little bit. So that's where we're going to pick up. But as we said, getting educated is an enormous piece of going through a divorce. And quite honestly, it's the responsibility of everyone going through a divorce to be educated. You can't throw over, your case over the fence to the professional and say, okay, it's up to you, get me a good outcome. That just isn't the way that it works. You have to be engaged. And, to think about it, your professional probably is working with anywhere from 15 or, 30 cases at a time. You do need to be on top of your own case, just like they do. Anyone who's worked with me, as I said, knows that I am a big proponent of being educated. Part of that is your options. What is happening? How do I split the assets? And another piece to that is the more educated you are, the more creative you can get. So I'm going to ask, can you guys share a little bit about the importance of, knowing the scenarios or the options of dividing the marital estate?
Oh boy, we could talk about this for another hour.
I wish we had another hour.
I know. I don't know. Karen, do you want to talk about this? Do you want?
Go ahead and start.
Okay. So when you don't know your options, how do you make a smart decision, right? And that's when, Hirsch, I stand behind you when you say knowledge is so important. And the reason I feel like a lot of people going through divorce don't focus on the knowledge is because they're focusing on the fear of the whole process and the fear of the outcome later, right? So if we could take that fear and turn it into focus, and that focus turned into knowledge, you're going to be able to understand the importance of those decisions you're making. Because let's face it, you're going to have to compromise, whether you like it or not, whether your spouse was wrong or not, whatever the fault was, it usually doesn't matter. you do have to compromise on something. But how do you do that if you don't know your options? And we see so many people who go in there without all the information and without the knowledge to make smart decisions. And they do premature negotiations, which is something we talk about all the time. Okay, I promise you get to keep the house and keep the kids in here and I'll take care of you. But what you're not hearing is that, guess what? For you to keep the house, of which your spouse will take care of until the agreement is signed, you're giving up maybe all of your retirement money, all your retirement security. So if you don't have that knowledge and know what the options are you could still keep the house and maybe some of the retirement monies, but you can't just agree to something without knowing what's available to you, which again is why we created the Divorce Financial Portrait.
And it's so important. You say a lot of people do come into the process, or when they're speaking to me, and they kind of have this impression it's a 50-50 split of everything, right? Straight down the middle kind of thing. And I say, okay, so are you living on the left or the right side of the house, right? I mean, it doesn't work that way. And you can get creative. And my approach, actually, which I think I like the way that you phrased it. I'm not going to try to rephrase it because I won't get it right. But I try to create for them or help them create really a values-based approach in understanding what their priorities are. As you said, you are going to have to compromise. You can't have everything that you've had before. But if you know what is important to you and really understand and focus on those pieces, you can have a more fulfilling life sometimes with less. And that, I think, gives them a little bit of hope sometimes as well. Not to say priorities don't change a little bit through the process, because, somebody who's married 20 years, as an example, they've probably forgotten who they really are and what all their values and priorities are. They've got to kind of relearn some of that.
Oh my gosh, absolutely.
Understanding that approach and saying, okay, we're going to split things. I don't want to just do this randomly. Really understanding what is important. For example, maybe somebody's 55 to 60, very common age group now to get divorced. They 5 to 10 years from retirement could be the top of mind. As you said, giving all of that away to keep the house, because you're now buying the house out, may not really align with those values that you have or with those priorities. So understanding that, it helps you make a decision in a much clearer way, I think, sometimes as well.
Oh my gosh, you're not kidding. I love that analogy about the house. Which side are you keeping? The left side or the right side? That's so good. And that goes in with that house. We hear all the time, well, my spouse said they're going to take care of me. They're going to fix the pool house. They're going to take care of the pool every year for me. I'm going to keep that because he really wants his pension and I really want to stay here. Well, I can't tell you how many people months later, the spouse doesn't come back and fix the pool house. They don't keep taking care of the pool for you. And now you're stuck with that. You didn't really understand.
He's also going to pay the 6 months of maintenance, that alimony we were speaking about, till you can actually qualify for a mortgage to refinance. And 2 months in, something happens, right? So we do. And that's part of the education as well. And I think that becomes so important. And, part of getting creative, I think, is knowing all of this and knowing the areas where you can compromise. That's one of the things that I do so often with my clients is I don't just help them identify what their priorities are. We try to guess a little bit what the spouse's is going to be as well. And I've got a whole kind of session and exercise on this, because that helps you know where to maybe you want to compromise, where you're willing to compromise, or what he may be or she may be willing to compromise. So what are your thoughts on how to successfully compromise? It is a big piece of this.
Well, as we said, one of the big pieces of it is making sure you're prepared. And when you're looking at your options, understanding that it's not what your spouse says, it's not what your attorney says, and it's not your emotions. Those are the three areas where people go off the rails, as I say, because your emotions are saying, I need the house for X amount of reasons, or I want this, or I want that, but it's not from a knowing, it's from an emotion. And often when I'm working with clients, they're telling me, well, my attorney said that I should take this, or my spouse says he's not or she's not giving up this. And I repeatedly say, that's not the decision maker. The facts are before you. You make the decision on what's best for you and your goals. And from that space, let your attorney and your spouse know, this is what I want, and this is why I want it. And I know the financial impact of that decision. And to your point, being educated along the way really grounds you in that knowing, so that when you go to the table to compromise, you know what compromise in any area or in any way means to that financial settlement.
Yeah,
I want to add, can I add to that?
yeah, of course.
So one thing our platform does, and it supports what Karen's saying, but it continues beyond that, and it goes into what you're saying, Hirsch, which we do have similar backgrounds. I mean, I'm also finding out we have similar thought processes. So our platform allows for the spouse to be a participant if they're not joint clients, right? So what happens is two reports that go into the portrait are division scenarios. And a lot of times the spouse will come with a proposed division scenario. Remember, we're not attorneys. We're not telling them what they do, but listen, we're all adults, and every adult has an opinion of what they think the divorce settlement should be. Right. So why should that not be heard? That's part of the emotional value to this process. So the spouse comes into our process, and during a review will tell us their proposed division. How valuable is that? In so many ways, because now, to your point earlier, Hirsch, we get to know what that looks like. So our client now can have a division scenario conversation. Well, if spouse does get all of these things, what is it that you would want? Or what's the impact for you to negotiate away something? And you get to see it in data format, and you get to account for the spouse's emotion. So a lot of times spouses will say, well, I know he won't give up that. I know she definitely wants that. Okay, well, sometimes it comes in the proposed division scenario, and sometimes it doesn't. But if you have your A, B, and C scenario where you could be creative because you understand all of this, how nice is that to be able to make a smart decision knowing the impact of it?
And if they're going to dig in their heels, as you were saying, then you have a right to ask for something in return. And this helps you, and I do want to point out, I guess, we've been talking a little bit as though this is a fairly linear process. And I do want to point out, we spoke about the components of a marital estate, and then collecting the documents, and then interpreting the documents. But a divorce is not linear. You may get documents over months during discovery, or you may get 300 documents dumped on you at the last day of discovery, right? I mean, it's not a linear process always. And this may be even more of a reason to have a platform to keep organized as things come in, to be able to gather them, keep them organized, and we've covered a lot of areas where someone going into divorce needs to become competent. So using a platform to keep all of this organized and structured, I think, is huge. So can you talk a little bit about that maybe as well?
Yeah, I'm going to let Karen talk about this, but Karen, can you please go over how many times people come through the process? And like you said, Hirsch, those 300 documents come in today for a mediation tomorrow. And the fact that they don't know that they could put this stuff on hold. Can you add that into your?
Yes, absolutely. The document process in divorce litigation is extraordinary. And a lot of it comes from an attorney doing their due diligence, which is important. They have to do that. And sometimes it comes from a client's position at the table that they believe that this area of their financial life needs to be explored. And so all of this money is going to forensic and collecting documents, or, a paralegal looking through 1,000 pages of expense reports for $1,000 or whatever it may be. So being prepared and having all of the documentation that supports your marital estate in front of you is so helpful, because when these ancillary issues come up, not that they're sometimes very important, but most of the time ancillary, you understand the financial impact of going after those additional documents. And so when you get, like we did 2 days ago, get 1,000 documents in, we know the relevancy of those documents because it's right there in front of us. It's right there in front of the client in a portal, organized, where you can just click to whatever you need. And so if a random document comes in, it kind of sticks out like a sore thumb, because sometimes that is the tactic for the other side, to just distract the whole process to something else, to deflect what the real issues are.
Right. And I think, I just want to point out something that's been like tugging in my brain since you said it. But when somebody makes promises prematurely, very often that's actually a red flag not to trust that,
Right.
And I think very often data does talk to it to kind of give you the direction of things. I've done a fair bit of forensic work, and I can't tell you how often somebody says, we don't need to do this. It's fine, right? And then, if I didn't have kind of a structured way to put it together, and it literally can be 300 documents, thousands of pages that I'm wading through. If I didn't have a structured approach to this, and I do this for a living, I would be lost. So somebody going through a divorce who really, this is not what they do day in, day out. They're not always even comfortable or familiar with what they're doing. I couldn't imagine how they would do it without having a platform to be able to do all the things that you're saying.
Absolutely.
So I do think it's very, very important that people kind of think about it, think through it, understand there are better ways to do it. I'm not knocking attorneys that have been doing this for 25 years, but 25 years ago, there really were no solutions out there. Even 10 years ago, there were limited solutions out there for people. It doesn't take away from their expertise as a professional. It supplements and sometimes aids them in being even better. And I think that's something that's sometimes lost. This is a tool, it's not a replacement. And I think that's a big piece to this as well.
Yeah. And it assists the client to be an informed, engaged client, so that if you have a court appearance or a mediation coming up, our clients feel very confident to say, you know what, we're not ready for this because we just got these documents. So why are we showing up to discuss anything? Because we haven't had time to go through it. And so many of our clients will say, well, do we have that ability? Sure, you have the ability as a client to go to your counsel and say, I believe we need to reschedule because we haven't had the time to review this data. So what are we going to negotiate then?
Right. Absolutely. We do have to start wrapping up, unfortunately, because as you said, each one of these kind of topics could be an hour show on its own. But I think really understand that everyone's divorce is a personal experience, and that, you hear about some, it was easy, it was 5 or 6 months. And then you hear others, literally, the longest I've ever worked, or I didn't work with them the whole time, but I had somebody who it took 9.5 years on and off before the divorce became final. So what advice or what thoughts, I guess, like parting wisdom, if you can call it that, do you have for somebody contemplating or starting the divorce process? And I want to throw out, it's not always the person who initiated and filed for divorce. There are people that come into this begrudgingly or blindsided sometimes. So any thoughts, any advice that you have for people starting out on the process?
It really does matter how you start the process. I don't care what anybody tells you. It matters how you start. And it also, if you've already started the process, your next step really matters. So if you do not have financial clarity and you don't have any financial confidence, then you need to stop, take pause, and get that clarity. You cannot make smart, informed decision without the knowledge we're all talking about. And you know what? Most importantly, you deserve it. You have a right to have this financial knowledge and then to negotiate away anything that you want to once you have this knowledge.
I agree 100%. Karen, any thoughts? Anything?
Yes, absolutely. So I want to give permission to take one step at a time and give yourself permission to know what you need to know. So many people want to hand it over to the experts or to whoever, their entire team. But you can know this information so that you can be informed and engaged. Because at the end of the day, if you hand it over to all the professionals, first of all, they're not going to be aligned. And second of all, it may not be to your best benefit because they're just doing the best they can do. Your input, your knowledge, and your ability to engage is critical to the end result.
I love both of that. I think, if you don't know what you want and you haven't prepared and thought through and collected everything, how's your attorney or the person negotiating on your behalf going to know? So I think so valuable to be able to get organized, start off right, take your time a little bit, not always permit, not the timetable doesn't always permit it in the easiest way to think through things on your time schedule, but take as much time as you can that's reasonable, communicate that information appropriately so that you can get more of what you want. Because for the most part, you really do only get one shot at this. And so you want to take your best shot that you can. So Karen and Catherine, I really, really appreciate. We covered a lot of different things and how to just get ready, let alone go through and go beyond your divorce. And I think, as you said, it's kind of like building a house. This is your foundation. And really getting ready is such an important piece to it, because people don't know how to even start. That first step is the biggest step sometimes, right? So I also encourage everybody, the way to get in touch is you can go to mydivorcesolution.com. You can see bios, you can see information. There's a lot of great information on the website. So I encourage everybody to reach out to Catherine and Karen and to go to mydivorcesolution.com. I am Hirsch Sermon, the host for the Financial Wellness Hour, and I would appreciate if you reached out to me through my website, lifecycle.financial. That's lifecycle.financial. And please do reach out with any questions that you might have. CC Schatz, my producer, thank you for all that you do behind the scenes, taking care of all the static and all the noise. I appreciate that. It helps us have a discussion and just bring out such great information. I look forward to everybody joining me on my next show. Thank you so much. Have a great week and enjoy your summer.